Hi. If you're like most of the rest of the world, your life has been seriously affected by the pandemic of the past year plus. Um, you may have caught the virus and not known it and not gotten sick. I'm in that category. I may or may not have caught it, and I never knew it. You may have got it and it developed COVID-19 from that infection, and you may have ended up having some problems. You may have even ended up in the hospital, or you may know somebody else who that happened to. You may even have lost somebody that you loved or cared about to the severe impact of COVID 19. You may know somebody who is struggling with the after effects of COVID 19 because there are, for some people, lifelong side effects even after being cured, that deal with like the lungs and the heart and the brains and stuff like that. Um, you may have lost your job. You may have lost your job repeatedly. You may have lost your car. You may have lost your home. You may have lost pretty much everything, and it may have been really, really, really very stressful for you. And I totally sympathize with you, and I'm very sorry that it has been such a hard time for everybody when the politicians first started locking things down, shutting businesses down, telling people they couldn't go to work, couldn't use daycare, couldn't send their kids to school, my first reaction, and I don't want to say things that are just going to make you stop listening, so I'm going to kind of gloss over those things, but my first reaction was, why? Why are so many people being forced to suffer for a disease that is, comparatively speaking, not that bad? And I say that fully understanding that for some people it has been really horrible. I've I think I've been fairly fortunate in that I have never been seriously ill. I think I've caught like dengue and some other diseases like that from mosquitoes, but um, aside from that, my I think the worst thing that I've experienced probably is when I was having an allergic reaction to the cat we got, and I was having such a horrible, horrible time breathing. There were a few days where, before I was able to get medication, where I was seriously thinking I'm going to end up in the hospital because I'm having so much trouble breathing. But it wasn't COVID 19. It wasn't a SARS-CoV-2 infection. It was just my allergies. Um, anyways, this past year plus has been incredibly difficult for billions of people around the planet. And so when I saw the measures that the leaders of nations and states and provinces and stuff were taking to deal with the pandemic, I was extremely concerned. Um, on the one hand, I was very concerned for healthcare workers because if anybody's going to get hit hardest by an epidemic, it's going to be healthcare workers. They have to be so careful, and even if they are careful, they're dealing with dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of people a day, at least in passing, and they could very, very easily end up getting sick and even dying. And some healthcare workers have died. And in some countries, it's been very, very bad. The number of healthcare workers that died was very large. Um, but on the other hand, I was also very worried about the average person like you and me. I'm not in a high risk group. I don't have diabetes or anything else. I'm not immune compromised. I'm just a regular 54-year-old guy, and nothing led me to believe that I would ever have any real problems with the virus. And so far, it's been that way. And had my first vaccination already, and I'm going to be getting my second one in a week or two. Um, but a lot of people have really struggled. And they've struggled financially. They've been evicted because although the governments were telling people you can't go to work, you can't do this, you can't do that, they were not providing any way to help these people pay their rent. And in some cases, they were not providing laws that prevented evictions of people because of the pandemic. And that was incredibly stupid on the part of politicians. And I hope they got roasted for it. Um, in addition to that, people have lost jobs, and they've lost their homes that they have had mortgages on, and they've lost their cars that got repossessed, and they lost their security. They lost their health, perhaps. Some of you have been struggling with depression. Maybe you have turned to alcohol or narcotics to try to cope with the situation, which in reality is only making your situation worse. Some of you are either the giver or receiver of physical, verbal, or mental abuse. Um, some of you may have been divorced as a result of being around your spouse too much during the lockdown. Um, and so on and so on and so on. People have turned to crime to try and take care of their families. Um, there has been a serious increase in the amount of online fraud, telephone fraud, and even text message fraud or SMS fraud and mail fraud. Um, it's been really hard all around for a lot of people, and the worst of people amongst us have been taking advantage of that to not just earn a little bit of money to get by, but to earn huge amounts of money. And yeah, they're scum. Um, to to hurt people who are already hurting so badly, that is just people who are not just immoral, but they don't care about other people. I understand that you've been hurt maybe, but destroying lives like that, of people you don't even know, that's... I mean, I can understand if you're going after somebody who's a really bad person and you want to destroy their life, but to go after people you don't even know just so you can earn money, and take sometimes all of their life savings, that is just wrong. So maybe you feel like, what's the point of carrying on? What's the point of uh, not being drunk, not being high? Why shouldn't you just live on government largesse? And I'd like to point out to you that if you stay in that situation when you have options available to you that you, whether you're aware of them or not, you're trapping yourself, and anybody who loves you is trapped with you because of your decisions. And I'd like to ask you to please look at the situation that you're in from a different perspective. And I realize saying this that some of you are in absolutely horrible situations, with abuse and a community that is full of violence and drugs, and uh, in some places it's like a war zone. And I don't just speak of the U.S. I know that there are communities where it's just absolutely horrible, where each area is controlled by a different gang, or a drug cartel or whatever. But you have always got options. You may have to make sacrifices to make your life better, but there are always choices that you can make to improve your life. And I'd like to remind you that what's happened in the past is the past. You can look at it and you can torment yourself about it. You can cry about it and feel miserable, or you can learn from it and use it to help you to grow as a person, to be more aware of risky decisions, and how to make better decisions, how to be nicer to people. And then there's the future, and the future is something that, of course, you should plan for, but you shouldn't spend all of your time, waiting for the future to come, because the future isn't going to come if you're not making any effort. So take the past and learn from it. Take the future and prepare for it, but focus on what you've got now and what you can do to make a change for the better. Because this pandemic may have hit you extremely hard. And just so you know, I've been poor. I've been on the verge of losing my home. I've been on the where I have to go to food pantries to get food. I had to flee from Indonesia, where I lived for 15 plus years after my wife died, because my wife's family was persecuting me and they were looking for an assassin to get rid of me. And I've been through some bad stuff, and I'm sure you probably have too. Most people have. But that doesn't mean you can't work toward a better future. That doesn't mean you can't work toward making yourself a better person. And it doesn't certainly mean that you should be living in the past and crying about it and letting the past ruin your present and your future. Because the past is meant to be in the past. You don't have to allow the past to dictate your path into the future. Okay? You have the option to make the best of things, to improve things. Just remember, you can accept what the situation you're in, or the problem that you're facing, or the challenge that you're facing, or you can work to change it. But if it's so intolerable, or so dangerous perhaps, or risky in some other way, that you feel there's no way you can change it, and you can't just deal with it, you can also leave. Because, leaving sometimes is a very painful choice, but it can also be the best choice long term. You may not feel that way at the time, but after you get out of it, eventually you may come to realize, wow, I am so glad I'm out of that situation. Because maybe if you don't get out of that situation, you'll end up dead. And I mean, there are so many stories out there of people who have not made the changes necessary and have ended up dead. I was reading a story just yesterday about a girl in high school who was dating an upperclassman, and he was controlling. He was clearly a misogynist, and they would break up and get back together again. Her parents didn't like him. He wasn't allowed at their house. They tried to tell their daughter not to date him anymore, but she didn't listen. And eventually, she did break it off, and then he started doing things to scare her and manipulate her into wanting to have him around again. And he killed her. He stalked her, he tricked her, and he killed her. And there are so many stories like that. And I realize you may have been manipulated into believing you're worthless. You may have been manipulated into believing that nobody's going to ever want you. You may have been manipulated, but like most of us, into believing that you have to have somebody. But I'm here to tell you that you are worth far more than you believe, far more than that person is telling you. And you don't actually need somebody. You can get by on your own. It may be challenging. I'm on my own with my kids, and that's my choice, for reasons that I've made clear in other videos. But please, take control of your destiny. Make changes in your life that make your life happier, safer, and more productive. And stop wallowing in the past and start preparing for a better life and a better you. Thank you very much. I wish you happiness and success. Have a great day.